Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 4 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where just before the deadline I talk you through your last minute dilemmas and discussion points. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, or potentially if you are new, please do subscribe. As I've said, we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers and I'd absolutely love to hit that milestone soon. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, over the last couple of weeks, we've probably discussed to death whether I think you should sell your Manchester United and Arsenal midfielders and who I would prioritise selling out of them. We did that again in the Game Week preview video earlier in the week. So if you want to know who I'd prioritise selling, what I think about all of the different midfielders, then go back and watch that video. But I got yet another few questions once again, specifically around Marcus Rashford. I think a lot of people, myself included, are pretty happy selling Martinelli, Odegaard, etc. and bringing in one of Sterling, Maddison and Foden. And we're going to discuss those three in the next section. But then a lot of people are thinking, especially if you've got 2 free transfers, well, I've still got 1 free transfer left. I can only bring in one of those 3 assets. Is Rashford to one of the ones that I don't bring in worth it? So let's say, for example, I do, and I'm not saying I'm going to this, but Martinelli to Sterling, I would then still have 1 free transfer to do Rashford to one of Maddison or Foden. And that is still something that's worth discussing. So we're going to discuss it here. I don't know the answer is the honest truth. I think this is a very, very difficult one. And because I'm still debating it in my own head, I'm probably not going to be able to give you the most clear-cut answer on this. But I'm going to talk through the pros and cons of Rashford. And hopefully you'll be able to come to your own decision around whether you think he is a good asset to hold and to play moving forward. The fixtures, I actually don't think are particularly bad. I think Arsenal, Brighton, Burnley, Palace and Brentford, as a 5, from an attacking perspective, are actually absolutely fine fixtures. I don't think Rashford will particularly struggle against any of these teams to score goals. I know Arsenal and Brighton are 2 very good teams. And Brentford and Palace aren't bad, and we're expecting Burnley to have a good season. But none of these defences strike me as defences that are going to be really difficult to break down. Arsenal haven't necessarily looked terrible defensively in the opening 3, but they've certainly not looked as strong as last season. Brighton look an absolute mess at the moment, and this is a home game for Rashford in Game Week 5 as well. So I look at that and think, do you know what? That probably is a decent fixture. They've been conceding over 2 expected goals in the opening 3, and they look like good fixtures on paper. I think Burnley and Palace are defences that could be got at. Arguably, Palace might be one of the better defences on this list here at the moment, but still, again, that is a home fixture. And then Brentford at home in Game Week 8 as well. Brentford are a decent defence, but it is a home fixture, and we know Rashford plays much, much better at home. So in the next 5 weeks, 3 very decent home fixtures, 2 away fixtures, one of them being an okay one. I don't mind the set of fixtures. So I think I look at that and I don't necessarily say that I would want to remove Rashford just because of the fixtures. When we look at the data over the opening 3 games, and again, this is a very, very small sample size, so do take it with a pinch of salt. It's looked pretty similar to what we saw last season. There has just been a slight drop-off, but still the data is strong. We're looking at 5.11 expected FPL points per 90. We're looking at a non-penalty expected goal involvement of 0.65 per 90 and over 1 big chance involvement per 90 as well. So by all accounts, Rashford is involved in a big chance every game. He's getting the chance to score goals. His creativity is actually decent as well. And 2 of those games were playing through the centre, and we know that Rashford prefers to play on the left. And the only game that he's played on the left, he got 2 assists, and his data was even stronger. Now, it's difficult to know. Is that because he moved back out to the left, which we know he prefers, or is it because he was playing against what was arguably the weakest defence of the 3 so far this season at home against Nottingham Forest? I'm not saying Forest are a bad team, but they are quite leaky at the back away from home. So it's difficult to know, and this is what I'm saying about a small sample size. We just don't know what the reasoning is for the data and the change in the data, and we don't know what that will look like going forward. But to put all of that together, Rashford has been involved in 3 big chances so far. He's getting involved in a big chance every game over the opening 3. His data is pretty good. He's still getting the chance to score goals. He's still creating a little bit too. His touch map looks very, very good. And the fixtures coming up for Manchester United are very strong too. Maybe not as strong as some of the other teams, but I definitely don't dislike them from an attacking perspective for the reasons that I've listed, especially the fact that they've got 3 home games in the next 5. So is Rashford a good option to keep? Absolutely, in my opinion. But I don't think necessarily anyone is looking at this and saying Rashford is a bad option. And I think if you are, then you are wrong on that. I don't think he's a bad option. But maybe you're looking at it and thinking, he's 9 million. The fixtures coming up aren't bad, but there are teams with much better fixtures, and there are more in-demand assets. And to that, I would definitely agree. And this is the issue that I've got at the moment. I don't want to sell Rashford because I think Rashford is a good option. And if you were to ask me over the next 5, I would expect Rashford to get 3 or 4 attacking returns. I genuinely believe that. I think these are really nice games for him. But do I think that Foden, Sterling, and Maddison will outscore him, I would argue probably yes to all three, because they have got very similar data. They're playing in very decent teams too, with probably better fixtures coming up. So this is the thing that you need to decide for yourself. My opinion on Rashford is that he's a really good asset to hold. He will perform better on the left, and I expect him to get attacking returns in the upcoming games. Whether or not he can match the likes of Sterling, Maddison, Foden, and Burmo, I don't really know. And if I run a wildcard this week, I wouldn't have Marcus Rashford. So I'm starting to think to myself, if I was on a wildcard and I wouldn't have Rashford, and I think Sterling, Maddison, Foden are better options, and I've got a spare free transfer, why do I not take out Rashford? And I think what that comes down to is psychology. We've got this sort of loss aversion, and also like mere ownership effect and endowment effect. These are all terms which basically mean we've invested in Rashford to date, we own Rashford, so we maybe overvalue how good he is. We often don't want to sell an asset we've got in the fear that once we sell that asset, they'll start returning really well. But if I were to just give you an option, do you want Sterling or do you want Rashford? Well, then that's a pretty easy decision for you, I think, for most people. So maybe we do use the free transfer, and I'm certainly not against it. This one will go down to the deadline stream for me, and that's not to try and create more views for the deadline stream. I really don't know how to feel about this, because realistically, I think my transfer will probably be Sterling or Maddison in for Martinelli, and we'll discuss the reasoning for that in a second. Then I've got the option of basically, like I said, the other one to bring in, or maybe even bring in a Phil Foden for a Rashford, and I do like the sound of that. So I'll leave it there, because I don't really have an answer, yes or no, whether it's worth selling him. I would love to know what you're going to do down below in the comments. All of that to say, I think he would do very well if you keep him, but I do think there are viable alternatives that on paper should probably outscore him over the next few weeks. So let's discuss who they are. Now, this is the same graphic that I used in my Game Week 4 preview video, and I don't want to repeat content too much, so I'll go through this a little bit quicker than I did in that video. If you want my long form opinion on it, it hasn't changed massively, so you can go back and watch that video if you want it in a bit more detail. But just to start by saying, I don't think any of these three options are terrible. In fact, if I was on a wildcard this week, as we'll discuss at the end of the video when I show you a Game Week 4 wildcard draft, I would have all three of those, and these would be the three midfielders that I would want to own more than anyone in the game. But I obviously have to try and decide which one I want to bring in. And if I do use two transfers, as I said in the previous section, and I do take out Marcus Rashford, which two that I bring in, and I don't like leaving any of them out. Because yes, at the moment, I've got Foden ranked third, but actually, there's a very good chance that Foden comes into my team. I actually desperately want him in my team. So it almost feels wrong to put one of these in third, because it suggests that they're the worst option, when maybe I just think that there are some advantages to the others that maybe, like I said, Foden doesn't have. So just to kind of go through it very briefly, all of them have great fixtures over the next 5 or 6 weeks. I would say that Maddison's are the best longer term, because post Game Week 8, I think they're actually really, really nice for Spurs. But over the next 4, Maddison's probably got the trickiest fixtures. So if you're looking a little bit shorter term, Sterling, Foden have slightly better fixtures over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And then after that, I think Maddison's are good. And if you look at it as a 5, having Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton having the 3 newly promoted sides, they are decent fixtures for Spurs too. So I don't think there's a massive amount to separate them in the fixtures. But maybe if you are looking shorter term, you prefer Sterling and you prefer Foden. Data-wise, Maddison's got the best data over the opening 3. Historically, all 3 of them have really strong data. Raheem Sterling tends to be a slightly greater goal threat, and that is the thing that I think maybe is in benefit of Raheem Sterling. Out of these 3 options, he's had the most penalty area touches. I think he's actually had the most penalty area touches in the league over the opening 3 as well. So he's a player that gets into the box and will get opportunities to score goals, in my opinion, more than Maddison and more than Foden. I know that hasn't been the case over the opening 3, based on his data, but I just think longer term, he will get more opportunities to score goals, and you want your midfielders to be goal threats. So that is something in favour of Sterling for me. I don't think there's much to separate any of them, to be honest. I think my head is telling me that Sterling and Maddison are the better options because they're better for minutes. And I know Foden, there's a very good chance he plays the majority of minutes, but he is the biggest minutes risk here. So if I'm using my head here and thinking, they'll probably have similar-ish data. They'll probably have similar output when they play, and the fixtures are pretty similar too. When there's nothing to separate the 3, my head is telling me that the thing to separate them is minutes. And why would you bring in a player that could be benched and come off the bench for 5 minutes when there are 2 perfectly good options there that are nailed in their team and will play 80-plus minutes every week? So that is the thing that's making me say no Foden. That's the only reason he's in third. But then sort of like my heart and my gut feeling is telling me that Phil Foden will play minutes. I think he'll start most games at the moment. And when he starts, he's an exceptionally good option. And we've seen, I mean, I know he didn't start in Game Week 3, and I do wonder, it was due to a sickness bug. That's why Foden didn't start in Game Week 3. I wonder if he had started and got 1 or 2 returns, if this would be a completely different discussion point. I wonder if people are put off because he was benched in Game Week 3, despite the fact that that benching was due to illness. So I don't know. It's basically the short of it. I think Maddison and Sterling are the sensible ones on paper due to minutes. I don't think there's going to be, over the season, much to separate them with respect to output, with respect to underlying data, and there's not much to separate them with respect to fixtures when we're looking across the next sort of 5 to 6 game weeks. Little bit shorter term, I prefer Sterling. If you're looking a little bit longer term, I prefer Maddison. But I've got Phil Foden in the back of my mind, and at the moment, I really want Phil Foden. I don't know why I can't shake this feeling that Fulham at home and Nottingham Forest at home in the next 3 could be really nice fixtures. I think Fulham are very leaky, and I feel like Phil Foden is just playing very well. And just due to that illness, I think he's maybe slipped our mind a little bit. And due to the fact that Maddison and Sterling had really strong game week 3, I think that's just in our mind. It's called recency bias. I feel like we've just got that. Maybe you don't even realise that Foden being benched and Maddison and Sterling looking really good in 3 has just made you forget how good Foden looked in 2 and what Foden can do when he's on the pitch. But again, minutes aren't great. The other two feel a little bit more sensible. I don't know where I'm going to end up at the moment, but I will be removing Martinelli for one of these 3. And then the decision that I have to make is I've got Marcus Rashford. Do I remove Marcus Rashford and bring in one of the others? But then there will still be one of them that I don't bring in. This is absolutely excruciating because I would like to own all 3, but I can't. So I'll leave it there. I would love to know down below, how would you rank the 3 of them? Who are you looking to bring in? And are you potentially looking to bring in more than one of them? So this was actually a very, very popular question over on Twitter. So I thought I would at least discuss it briefly because obviously there are only a set number of people that have this decision to make. Maybe you don't own Sterling, but you also don't own Jackson. You didn't bring him in last week. Maybe you've got like a João Pedro or a Watkins in there. And you've also got like a Martinelli or an Odegaard in midfield. And you need to prioritise who do you bring in out of Sterling and out of Jackson. Well, the first thing to note is it does depend on who you're taking out. And of course, I can't answer that for everyone. If you've got João Pedro and Martinelli, I would argue taking out João Pedro for Jackson makes more sense than taking out Martinelli for Sterling, because I think Martinelli will do better this week and is a better long-term hold if you have to. So I think the first thing you need to identify is who you're taking out, because the way I play FPL is I prefer to take out issues rather than focusing on who I'm bringing in. So for me, my thought process wouldn't be, do I prefer Sterling or do I prefer Jackson? Because I think they are very similar-ish options. My thought process would be, who is the bigger issue in my team? A Martinelli or the midfielder or the forward that I'm taking out? So that is the first thing. But let's say that you're happy taking out either of them. Who do you prioritise out of Sterling and Jackson? I would expect them to get a similar amount of returns over the next 6 to 8 game weeks. I don't think that there, at the moment anyway, appears to be much to separate them. I think Jackson will get a higher quantity of chances. I think that just the way that he's played thus far, he looks like a busybody. He's getting a lot of chances. I think he will get more big chances than Sterling as well. But he hasn't proved that he's a fantastic finisher yet. And Sterling just has this natural ability to just pop up in the right point. So I don't think either of these are good finishers. I think both will put up good data, and I think both will get good attacking returns. I would say, all things put together, I would prefer Jackson slightly, just because I think there are so many good midfielders. And the reason that I say that, I think a midfield 5 of Mbeumo, Maddison, Foden, Saka, and Fernandes would be an exceptional midfield 5. Plus, then you could also have a Chelsea attacker in Jackson and Haaland. Whereas with Jackson, there are other forwards. Jesus, when he's back, will be great. Watkins still looks good. I like Wisser, I like Awoniyi. There are other forwards. I just think the midfield pool at the moment is so much stronger that if you are struggling between Sterling and Jackson, I prefer the idea of bringing in Jackson and then going for a Maddison or a Foden or an Mbeumo in the midfield. And at least I think that combination will be better than the alternative. I would love to know down below again, Sterling and Jackson, will you own both, one, neither? Because for me, I think at the moment there is a chance that I go in with a double Chelsea attack. So there are also quite a few questions around ranking the forwards, again, as we had last week. And also, like, maybe people looking for João Pedro replacements, or again, maybe you don't have Jackson in your team, or you're just looking to remove some money from the attack to invest it into the midfield, into the defense. So this graphic I made last week, and it's my opinion on it hasn't changed. And the thought process behind this was, I think you need to think about what you're trying to achieve with the transfer. Are you looking for a short-term explosive option? If that's the case, I think Alvarez is still the option. Like, I think if you're just going for someone that you don't mind replacing in 2 to 3 weeks, and you are hoping will get you a lot of points over that short spell, Alvarez's fixtures are still really good, and I still expect him to get significant minutes. I still feel like Jackson's fixtures, again, over the short term are very good. Ollie Watkins, I know he's got Liverpool this week, but it's not a terrible game. Again, Van Dijk is out. Liverpool are not a particularly good defence. I don't mind that. I think most of the time in FPL, you want to look across sort of 5 to 6 game weeks. I think that's a really, really nice period of time to look. And if that's the case, then of course it's still Jackson. I still feel like Wisser is a really nice option. Alvarez drops down slightly, and Watkins is still in 4th, because up until about game week 8, game week 9, I don't particularly like Villa's fixtures, even though they are okay. When you're looking longer term, though, of course, like I said, then all of a sudden Watkins becomes the best option. Isak starts to enter the conversation as well. So you really need to think about what you're trying to achieve with your forward transfers. And this is just transfers in general. Like when I'm bringing in a player, I always think, am I happy changing this spot in the next 2 to 3 weeks? If I am, you bring in a punt. Someone, for example, like a Bowen could be a really, really nice option in midfield if you're happy taking a really short-term punt. But most of the time, you probably aren't thinking, I only want to own this player for 2 or 3 weeks. Most of the time, you're thinking, I'd like to at least keep them there for 4 to 5 weeks. And if that's the case, I still feel like you can't really go wrong with Jackson. Maybe Watkins is a little bit longer term at the moment, and maybe you want to wait a few more weeks on that. And again, maybe Alvarez is going to be fine for 4 to 5 weeks, but with the UCL kicking in, I would worry slightly. Then the other question was around kind of those cheaper forwards. So let's say, for example, you are looking to replace João Pedro in particular, or you are looking to remove some money from the attack. Taking all of that into account, taking into account the length of time that you would want them, taking into account the price, the fixtures, everything, who would I say is my favourite cheaper options? And I've gone for sort of Alvarez as the most expensive option here. And I do think that if you have the money for Alvarez, with the fixtures they've got, even with the UCL kicking in after game week 5, I still feel like he's probably the better option. And you can always remove him in 3 to 4 weeks if it looks like he'll be a rotation risk. But he still has to be up there for me. If you're looking for a slightly longer term option and a slightly safer option as well, Wissa is still really good. And again, it's a bit of recency bias. Did so well in the opening 2, blanked in game week 3. And as a result, lots of people are starting to forget about Wissa. But the point remains that he plays very well in the absence of Tony, takes a lot of shots. Brentford are a good attack. And the fixtures coming up for Brentford are still very good. So Wissa has to be in the conversation, despite the fact that maybe he's not a particularly sexy pick because he's been in the Premier League in the past and he's ticked along nicely and everyone's got him Burma, or a lot of people have him Burma already. So I understand the reasons you might not want to pick Wissa, but I still feel like he's a really, really good option and someone that is continuing to probably go under the radar as well. In number 3, I've just gone for it. Antonio, a 1-week punt pretty much against Luton. If this is the sort of manager that you are, this looks like a very good fixture. The only thing I would say is we haven't yet seen Luton play at home, so maybe they'll be slightly better at home. But in the 2 fixtures that we've seen thus far against Brighton and Chelsea, they were shambolic defensively. Antonio looks back to his best alongside Bowen. I really don't mind a 1-week punt on a West Ham player if that's the way you play FPL. But you have to know that the fixtures coming up, I think they've got City, Liverpool and Newcastle in 3 of the 4 fixtures after Luton. So it's either a 1-week punt and then you remove them after that, or you need to realise that you'll probably pick them and then want to bench them in some of the upcoming game weeks. So just make sure that you have the players to rotate them in. But Antonio looks really good at the moment, and so do West Ham. I've got to have a Wonyi on here. The issue with the Wonyi is that the fixtures really aren't good over the next 3 or 4 still. It's not until around game week 8, game week 9 when we might want to start thinking about playing our wildcard, that a Wonyi's fixtures improve. So whilst I love a Wonyi, and he scored 7 games in a row, 9 goals in those games, and we have to talk about him, I just don't think the fixtures are there for me. Despite the fact that he has scored against tricky opposition in the past, I just think there are players with better fixtures that I would rather target first. In 5th, I've got Edouard. This is just kind of to fill out the list, to be honest, but I think you could do worse. Crystal Palace's fixtures are starting to improve from here on out, and at the moment, thus far, does look like his first choice for this season. I think there are rumours about Mateta leaving. They don't really have many other options. I think Edouard kind of has to play. And as a result, I think he could be a really, really nice option if you do want to go different from some of the other kind of safer options, I would say. And then in 6th, I've got Archer. We have to talk about it. If you want to take all of the money out of your attack, you would expect Archer to start every game for Sheffield United, and he could score goals. There's rumours that he could even potentially be on penalties too. I don't dislike that at all, but I guess it depends. Do you need that forward to start every week? Because if you need them to start every week, I would be going for someone more like a Wissa than an Archer. But if it's someone that you can rotate in for the nice fixtures, and maybe the fixtures do rotate well in your team, I don't mind the idea of taking all of the money out of that final spot and bringing in Archer. So these are some of the things that I'd be thinking about. Realistically, I think it's Alvarez for a short-term punt, Wissa a little bit longer term. If you can get up to Jackson, I still feel like Jackson is the one. So guys, just to finish, I've got a Game Week 4 Wildcard Draft. And don't worry if you're not wildcarding, because I think it will be useful. And I think I'm probably going to do this in most Deadline Decisions videos, because even if you're not wildcarding, it gives you a bit of an idea about how far your team is off of what you would think is the ideal that week. So sometimes I like to build a wildcard and just say, how far away is my team from where I want to get to? And what sort of structure and players should I be starting to think about moving towards? And I'll be honest, I don't think my team's too far off of this wildcard draft. I will just note it's 97% rated according to Fantasy Football Hub. And Game Week 4 deadline is when the 50% will end. I don't know what the new discount will be. I don't know if there will be a new discount. But Game Week 4 deadline is the final time that you can sign up for 50% off. So if you want to get the best discount possible, and you are thinking you might possibly want to use Fantasy Football Hub this season for underlying data, touch maps, player comparisons, etc., the fixture analyzer, then now is the time to sign up for 50% off. There will be a link down below in the description. I know a lot of people won't like some stuff about this wildcard, namely the fact that there are no Arsenal assets. The fixtures aren't great for Arsenal. And rather than just thinking, do I want to own an Arsenal asset? In my head, probably yes. I'm looking at each position, right? So do I want Saliba? I don't hate Saliba, but do I prefer the other defenders I've got? Yes. So I don't have Saliba. Then when I move on to the midfield, I prefer each of the midfielders more than Saka and Martinelli and Ødegaard. So it's not that I'm saying I don't want any Arsenal. It's that when I'm looking at the individual battles, I suppose, in the team and who I want to pick, they just don't make their way into my team. That isn't to say that I won't own them long term. I'll just maybe wait for the fixtures to clear up and some of these other options to potentially, like if one of these options starts to underperform, then you have to switch there. The thing to note about this wildcard is it's got 4 million in the bank. So you've got a very easy switch. You want to move to Gabriel Jesus, you can go there. If you want to move to an Arsenal, Saka, Martinelli, if you want to move to a Saliba, you've got all of these options here. You can even move to Salah around game week 8, game week 9 as well. So I like the idea of leaving that money in the bank because I don't really need to use it. I've got double Spurs in Udogie and Maddison. I've got triple Chelsea, Sterling, Chilwell, Jackson. I've actually got only 2 Man City assets. I've decided not to go for a defender just because I like Chilwell, Udogie, Henry, Estepinian and Fabian Schär. You could quite easily go for Gvardiol or, not Stones, Gvardiol or Diaz or someone like that instead of Estepinian if you wanted to. I don't dislike that. The midfield 5 was very, very tricky for me because I said I like Maddison, I like Sterling and I like Foden. Those 3 would definitely be in a wildcard draft and they would. I really like Mbeumo at his price point. I like the penalties, I like the fixtures, and I like the minutes. So Mbeumo has to be in there. And then it's basically Fernandes versus Saka. And at the moment, the data would suggest that Fernandes is the better option. I feel like the fixtures are slightly better for Manchester United. So it's basically Fernandes versus Saka. If you don't like Fernandes, then easy peasy. You just put Saka into that spot. But I look at this team, and it's not far off of where I'm at. I've got kind of 8 or 9 players similar. Of course, it's the big thing is I don't have Maddison, Sterling and Foden. I can probably only bring in 1, maybe 2. And maybe the bench is a little bit weaker in my team. But other than that, I'm not far off a wildcard draft. Assuming you can get something close-ish to this and you're happy with your team, I would probably hold the wildcard for now. Game week 9 and game week 19 look probably like the 2 best points to wildcard in the future. And I just think that most people can get away with either just using their free transfers or maybe taking a -4, maybe even a -8. I would argue up until about a -12, -16, it's still probably worth saving the wildcard. Because for me to justify a wildcard, you probably want to make 7 or 8 changes. And you also probably want to need to make those changes. Because yeah, I might make 7 or 8 changes in a perfect world. But it's probably not what, for example, I've got Fabian Schär rather than Botman here. That technically is a change, but it's a luxury change. So you want it to be in a position where the wildcard would really benefit your team rather than just using it to make a few luxury transfers here and there. So I think for most people, the wildcard should probably be kept. It is team dependent, and if you do play it, this is roughly what I'd be going for. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 4 deadline decisions video. This is the 5th upload of the week and the deadline stream makes 6. So if you do appreciate all of the content, please do make sure to subscribe. We are on the road to 100k and I would really, really appreciate it. And if you've watched this far and you're not yet subscribed, it probably means you enjoyed the video. So please do that for me and I would really, really appreciate it. And as I said before, make sure to follow me over on Instagram. As soon as we hit 100,000 subscribers, we are doing a giveaway and it'll be a big one. And at the moment, I don't have that many followers on Instagram. So you actually have a very reasonable chance of winning the giveaway. So do check out the Instagram. Make sure you follow me there. And as soon as we hit 100k, I will do the announcement of that giveaway. Until next time, which will, of course, be the deadline stream on Friday. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.